It is the Washington Commanders taking on the Detroit Lions. Lions defeated the Minnesota Vikings in the last game of the regular season to clinch home field advantage and the 1 seed. And obviously, it proved to be paramount because here we are in the divisional round, and the Minnesota Vikings are not there. They went on the road to the Los Angeles Rams, and obviously, we'll talk about the Rams in a second. But now the Lions get to come out and we get to see what they've got in the playoffs. Jayden
We're the
Daniels,
lone NFC North team left.
which is it's kind of crazy to say that. Obviously, the playoffs are a different beast, and teams are eliminated every single week, and it was some tough matchups for those teams. But now it's all on the Lions to represent that division as what was very clearly the best division in the NFL. They're taking on the Commanders, and Jayden, first playoff performance, goes into Tampa Bay, takes down a Todd Bowles defense, wins in dramatic fashion at the end, and gets revenge on the team that beat him in Week 1. So Jayden and the whole Commanders team traveling to Detroit. What's the matchup that matters? And then we'll get into plus factor after that. What do you got?
Yeah, I'm gonna get into kind of like a really hyper specific matchup that matters because I do think that these teams match up well for the most part. We know what the Lions are capable of offensively, and that's pretty much anything. But what I think doesn't get enough love is this run game in particular, but specifically the run game under center versus the Washington Commanders' run defense. Now, the Detroit Lions, they were the most explosive under center run game in the NFL, or run scheme in the NFL.
Makes sense.
They had 56 explosive runs from under center. That's 22 more than the next closest offense. The Lions were also, they did this a lot. They had the second highest success rate on design runs under center, 47%. By contrast, and this is why I got really hyper specific with it. By contrast, the Commanders defense has allowed the most yards before contact per carry, 1.8, and the highest success rate, 47%. They also allowed the second highest explosive run rate to under center design runs, 13.7%. Full disclosure, some of these stats are from NGS. I just want to get that out there. But this is something that the Detroit Lions know how to do very, very well. And it's something that I feel like is kind of a unique part of their run scheme. We talk about how unique it is. For most of the season, they had both Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. You have Jared Goff, who is a veteran and knows how to and can really manipulate where he ends up lining up, and the formations that they put out there, that they throw out there. Ben Johnson clearly not afraid to throw a variety of formations out there, even if it's just his window dressing. But it's something that they're very, very good at, and it's something that the Washington Commanders are not so good at defending. And I really think that the run game is going to matter so much in this game, but specifically it's going to matter how the Detroit Lions are running the football and running out of those under center runs. So I thought that was really an interesting stat to stumble upon, and just how poorly that matches up in Washington's sense, and how well the Lions match up and have the advantage there.
I mean, I'm right there with you because my plus factor in this game is the ageless one. It is Bobby Wagner, because I agree with you when I thought about this game and sort of the trends of where we're at with both of these teams and, how each team can secure a victory. The difference making trait to me is what the Lions are on the ground. And it allows them to be not only explosive, but methodical and create those long drives and own the time of possession and things like that. It's a little bit of the conversation that we had a few minutes ago with Patrick Mahomes. Well, how do you beat Jayden Daniels? Well, you don't let him touch the football, right? And I think the Lions are a team that has the offense to impose their will on another team's defense, and they do that because they're able to run the ball really well. Now, Bobby Wagner, I love that you pointed out these statistics because that's really great context. Bobby Wagner himself has been an excellent run defender. And even though, okay, maybe he doesn't quite have the coverage, flexibility, and agility and athleticism that he might have had when he was a little bit younger, but 89.6 run defense grade against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers last week, 91.4 run defense grade on the season. In the last 3 years, he has had a run defense grade above 91 in the last 3 years. And we were talking about Bobby Wagner. Oh, he fell off. He's not the player he used to be. Or again, like he's not as spry in coverage as he used to be. But this dude still knows exactly where to be. I think the duo of him and Frankie Luvo is perfect for the middle of this Dan Quinn defense, and they're playing it very, very well. And if there's going to be a player who can spearhead a run defense effort from Washington that is good enough to slow down one of the best rushing attacks, one of those explosive and efficient rushing attacks in the NFL, in the Detroit Lions, it is going to be Bobby Wagner. His IQ, his acumen, his experience, and being able to point things out pre-snap, to have guys aligned a certain way, and then for himself to also make those plays. So to me, it's paramount that he continues to play very well in the run defense category as he has been all season, as recently as last week against Tampa. So Bobby Wagner is my plus factor for exactly those reasons that you mentioned there. When I go to my matchup that matters, I think it kind of has to, for me, or at least one of us, we had to talk about some sort of Jayden Daniels angle for this game because at the end of the day, like, I don't know. I mean, is he your plus factor in this one, or do you have something a little bit?
No, I have another one because I
Okay,
figured that yeah we would. I had other stats about Jayden, but that was not my plus factor.
a
So
little
go
bit,
for it.
a little bit in the same spirit of how you talked about Nico Collins.
Mhm.
Basically, we could talk about all these other little things that could happen to swing the game either way. If Jayden Daniels isn't the best player on the field, I don't really know how the Commanders win this game, go into Detroit and upset this team. But I think they can do it if Jayden's the best player on the field. And he's shown over the course of this season that he has that ability to do that even at the very highest level. Now, an area that I'm really honing in on to see how effective he can be is passing over the middle of the field. It was an area where I had my question marks of how comfortable he was going to be doing that at the NFL level because at LSU, they just didn't ask him to do it a lot. A lot of what
Right.
he did was it was sideline throws to Brian Thomas Jr. It was slot fade throws to Malik Neighbors. Like a lot of stuff was at or outside the numbers. There wasn't a lot of pure over the middle stuff, but Jayden has shown this year that this is always the question, right? When you watch a prospect in college, you go, okay, did this player not do this because he can't or he's not good
Mhm.
at it? Or is it because that's just not what was asked of him? And
Right.
for Jayden, I had this question of how good of a middle of the field, intermediate middle of the field type of a passer he was because he just didn't do it a lot at LSU. Clearly, this year has shown us that that was more of a style of how LSU wanted to play with their playmakers than it was anything that Jayden had an inability to do or
Mhm.
a hesitancy to be able to throw over the middle. So when you look at him between the numbers last week against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 2 touchdowns, 9 first downs. He had one turnover worthy play. It was that Deion Jones play that was almost an interception there where he just didn't see Deion
Mhm.
Jones. But that's sort of, that's in the low red zone. And that's just, it's a little bit of a different game there. When you're talking about between the 20s, I thought he was
Yeah.
really good throwing over the middle of the field. 80.3 passing grade over the middle of the field overall this season, 6 big time throws, 7 turnover worthy plays. So right there, it's kind of an even thing. And you might say, well, oh, okay, he had more turnover worthy plays. It's hard to throw it over the middle without getting at least some turnover worthy plays. So it's actually not the worst thing in the world that it's right around even. So his 80.3 passing grade in that category, I think, is what gives more credence to what we can actually take away from him and how he threw over that portion of the field. On the flip side of things, the Detroit Lions, best team in the NFL at defending the middle of the field. 9 interceptions when
Yeah.
quarterbacks are throwing over the intermediate middle of the field and deep parts of the field. That's fifth most
Mhm.
in the NFL. 36 forced incompletions. That's the most. This is an aggressive team when it comes to attacking over the middle. And the reason why I bring that up is because we often talk about the linebackers for Detroit as a weak spot, right? Okay, well
Right.
let's have our team throw over the middle because the linebackers haven't been really good down the stretch. One, the Lions are a little bit more healthy in that regard, but two, if you attack the linebacker level, then you start to bring in Kirby Joseph. Then you start to bring in Brian
Brian
Branch. Then
Branch.
these guys start to get
Yep.
into the mix. And if you barely miss, you better believe that one of those guys is going to make you pay for it in a really big way. So to me, I think that Jayden has shown us even recently the ability to do a lot of things very well. Throw on the run, be a threat as a rusher. Although he didn't do it a lot, didn't have a lot of success in that area against Tampa, he still has that in his back pocket. Certainly the big time throws, the early big time throw to Terry McLaurin down the field right over Jamel Dean. I mean, it just does not get any more beautiful than that. All of that is still in his arsenal. Can he attack the middle of the field the way he needs to? And when he does, is Detroit going to be one of those teams that the very top of how they defend it, do they finally get the better of them? Because if they don't, then I think the rest of the recipe could be there for Jayden to be special in this game and really take it down to the wire and maybe do what a lot of people think is the impossible, and that is go into Detroit and ruin their Super Bowl run.
No, I can't say enough about just like this defensive unit when like Brian Branch and Kirby Joseph just really saved so much and masked so much. There's only so much Aaron Glenn could do with all of the defensive injuries that the Detroit Lions have had this year. You've seen the uptick in how much they blitz. It stresses, the back ends a lot more in those regards because you're forced into a lot more man coverage than maybe you'd like to play, given that you're trying to you're putting so many resources into the pass rush and just trying to get to the quarterback so that the ball doesn't come out in the first place. But the beneficial part of that though is too that if you can just affect the quarterback, get him to throw the ball before he's ready or make into some sort of errant throw, you have two guys that are the best at getting to the football. They have the nose for the football. They can take advantage of that kind of stuff and get you some turnovers, takeaways, all that kind of stuff, take some of the pressure off the defense. So I really like that call out a lot. I went something again, kind of specific, but it was born out of a stat I just kind of stumbled across between Washington and Detroit. And I think you didn't need to stumble across the stat to know these are two of the teams that like to go for it on fourth down, especially in the case of the Detroit Lions, but the Washington Commanders too. And the Lions and the Commanders were the only two teams in the NFL to gain over a full game's worth of win probability added as a result of going for it on fourth down this season. So cumulatively, you have this win probability added stat that comes up, and it cumulatively added up to a full game worth for both of these teams, only teams in the league to do that. And I went through this a little bit on the NFL on Fox podcast too, because it was something that I kind of identified this last game against the Buccaneers with the Commanders. They went for it 5 times on fourth down. It didn't always work out, but it worked out when they needed it to. And I don't even like using the term aggressive. And that was like my whole point of having this. It's a larger conversation to have, but like if you're in plus territory, it's short yardage. That shouldn't be labeled as aggressive for going for it on fourth down. That just makes sense. But overall, the Commanders have converted 20 of 23 fourth down attempts this season. That's the highest conversion rate, 87% of any offense with at least 15 attempts. And the Lions converted 2/3 of their fourth down conversion rate. So that's 66%, whatever. So right behind them. Last week in particular, I'm looking at it from a bird's eye view too. Every team that made the playoffs this year was top 10 in fourth down success rate in the regular season, except for the Buccaneers, who are 11th, but just outside the top 10. Mm-hmm. Washington led the league, as I just said, in not only convert success rate, but yards per play, 9.9 average yards per play on fourth down.
Wow.
That's insane.
Wow.
That is another set of downs at that point. It blows my mind. And their EPA per play, 2.15, that also leads the league. Mm-hmm. And then again, versus the Bucs, 4 of the 5 times they went for it, it matched models of, should they go for it, should they not? The penalty, honestly, when they got the penalty and then they ended up kicking it, that was the one that they didn't agree with. And that also, it was so weird for so many reasons because that just goes against everything that Dan Quinn had done up until that point and did for the rest of the game for that matter in, again, staying aggressive. Why you kick there and not go for the 2-point conversion from the 1-yard line, I don't really understand. But the point is that Washington stuck with it. And that's something that we know that Detroit will do too. Which of these teams is better on fourth down, I think is going to say a lot about who ends up winning this game. It's the team that gets to stay on the field, that gets to stay productive, that gets to outscore their opponent and take those risks and have those risks pay off. Whether or not you believe in momentum, that swings certain things if you can convert those kinds of downs, especially if you get a chunk play out of those downs, which Washington is so good at. If Washington can do all of that against the Detroit Lions, that gives them a real shot to upset them in their house with them having the first round bye and them having the number 1 seed and them being the Super Bowl favorites out of the NFC. It's so singular. But if Washington can get it done on fourth down in the way that they've been doing all season long, I think that that's going to go a long way. Even because like Detroit, like I feel like fourth down is known as like Detroit's thing.
Hmm.
And the Commanders can just be like, no, we can do it too.
Yeah.
And which is what Ben Johnson has been doing all season long to all teams that the Lions have played, is basically like identified something that that team does well and tell them that he can do it better. It works out more often than not, but it's going to be so interesting. And the in-game management of this game is going to matter so incredibly much. I'm so excited to see how these guys go at it.
I think it's a great call out because you're totally right. Everybody just thinks about Detroit as the team that goes for it. They're the aggressive team. It's the Dan Campbell style, and Dan Quinn standing right there being like, "Hey, we'll match you. We'll match you aggressive for aggressive.
And we're
We're
going
not
to do
afraid
it
of it."
well. We're
And
going
that's
to do it
and that
well.
also is, I think that lends itself to being the underdog on the road, right? You've
Yeah,
got to be aggressive. You
you have to
can't
be
be afraid.
aggressive.
If you let Detroit, like, and this is the same thing when they went into Tampa. If you let Tampa play their game, they're probably going to beat you. If
Yeah.
you let Detroit play their game, they're probably going to beat you. You've got to be able to make them uncomfortable. You've got to be able to say, we're not afraid to do the little things that might be a little bit riskier, but we're trying to win the football game. We're not trying to cover the spread. We're trying to win in advance and get into the conference championship. So I think that's a really good call out by you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Make sure you like and subscribe the video. And if you don't have a PFF Plus subscription, you can get one to see all the premium stats that we talked about here on the show, plus the expert betting and fantasy advice over at subscribe.pff.com. The description is also right below. So if you are not a PFF Plus subscriber, you can come one today.